Hello everybody, welcome to the Boxing Science Podcast. This is episode 57 where I'm going to be answering your questions about a range of different subjects regarding sports science, strength and conditioning for boxing and combat sports. And in this episode, I'm going to be covering a range of different subjects, including mixing hypertrophy and power training at the same time, different strategies to be able to do both at the same time. Going to be looking at high intensity conditioning methods, going to be looking at how to implement strength and conditioning within a boxing gym setting, and also looking to try and reduce the likelihood of injury during sparring. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future content. Let's get on with this week's episode. So first question, is it possible to train hypertrophy and power at the same time? So with this, I'd like to do blocks of training. So if we're going to be focusing on a specific adaptation, we want to be focusing on that particular adaptation. So if we're in a hypertrophy block to optimize muscular hypertrophy, we predominantly want to be focusing on muscular hypertrophy, as with strength, speed, and power as well. So can it be trained at the same time? Potentially not, but there's strategies that we need to do to make sure that we're increasing muscular hypertrophy whilst not reducing any power, or maybe complementing gains in power. Now, what I mean by that is, if you train like a regular bodybuilder and you do hundreds of reps, bicep curls, bench press, doing squats, if you're doing large amounts of volume under lower loads, what'll happen that you'll start developing type 1 muscle fibers, which are like slow twitch muscle fibers, rather than developing type 2 muscle fibers, which are our fast twitch muscle fibers. Things that we need to do to make sure that we are developing fast twitch muscle fibers when we're targeting muscular hypertrophy. And there's a range of different ways that we can do this. One being cluster sets, where we are doing high volume sets, let's say a set of 8, having this with a short recovery in between. So instead of doing 8 reps back to back at a lower load, we're doing a higher load, but doing 4 repetitions, resting for 10 to 15 seconds, and then doing 4 repetitions. And then another way to do it is doing drop sets, where increasing the amount of volume over 2 different loads, but we are top loading it with an increased loaded exercise. So let's say for shoulder press, for example, we'll do a heavy loaded shoulder press between 5 and 6 repetitions. We then drop the weights, reduce the load, and then we'll do a set of 8 or 10 repetitions of the same exercise. This means that we are increasing the volume, but we've still got them high threshold motor units, that high loaded work at the start to develop strength and power, whilst also targeting the volume that's needed for muscular hypertrophy. Another way to do it is doing that with supersets. So instead of doing a drop set on the same exercise, we can do heavy loaded shoulder press, drop down the weight, and then do an assistance exercise, so doing something like lateral raises. You can also do BFR training, so blood flow restriction training. This targets type 2 muscle fibers under lower loads because it's fatiguing the slow twitch muscle fibers. That then targets type 2 muscle fibers under lower loads, and also increases the recruitment of motor units that is needed for developing speed and power. And you're doing this under a lower load, under higher volumes. So then this is developing muscular hypertrophy, but also targeting strength and speed at the same time. Other things to do whilst doing a hypertrophy block is to include movement and speed into the program. So still do your plyometrics, still do your mobility training when doing muscular hypertrophy work. So you're keeping speed and movement in the program rather than doing a heavy block of muscular hypertrophy work, then going into your normal strength conditioning, end up being stiff, end up being slow, and trying to play catch up. Keeping speed a part of the program is really important when doing muscular hypertrophy work. So just type in gain muscle and speed for boxing. It'll be the first video on there on YouTube. Next question, talking about conditioning, how to structure deload weeks when I'm focusing on central adaptations. So deload weeks are really important because we're wanting to push our body to try and implement progressive overload. This will create adaptation, but from this, we need to deload to let our body recover to take most of that adaptation. So this is not only important for performance, but it's also important for recovery to make sure that our athletes aren't getting overtrained, overreaching, end up being fatigued, ill, or maybe injured. So deload weeks are really important. Now, what a lot of people perceive deload weeks to be is a reduction of training load. So then they're thinking, right, the exercises that we're going to be doing is going to be less intense. But it basically is a reduction in training load, not in terms of training intensity. When we're looking to try and deload, we're still doing hard workouts, but we're doing less volume. So let's say central adaptations, the main workout that we do is 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off. On that heavier week, we might be going towards 5 or 6 repetitions of this. On the deload week, when we're dropping it down, we're only going to do 4 repetitions. This allows us to still train that adaptation, but a lot less load. If you do the deload too low, this will basically find it hard to then rebuild up that training load, because if you do a deload week that's too low, to then start building that back up again, it's not the amount of training that you do, but it's the spike in training load that can affect somebody's kind of overreaching or illness or injury. So what we're wanting to do is just deload a little bit and then keep pushing on. So in terms of deload weeks, in terms of your question, is on the central adaptations, just reducing towards that minimum effective dose. And this can be also applied to sprint interval training, muscle buffering conditioning, maybe even sparring. If you're looking to go towards heavy sparring, going towards 8 or 10 rounds, drop the next week, drop to 6 rounds and start building it back up again. So periodizing training, periodizing deload weeks, really important to enhance recovery, reduce the chances of overreaching and overtraining, and also to help improve performance. Okay, so next question. Hello there. I have 2 mild cervical disc injuries. I'm having pain after workout on the bag. Shadow boxing is no problem at all. How can I avoid the pain, or am I done with boxing? So this is quite specific to this individual, the answer. Some of the answers that I might provide might actually relate to you as well, or relate to an athlete that might be injured. So it's pain after the bag, but then no problem through shadow boxing. So what you're finding difficult at the minute is probably the impact forces and the intensity that you're putting into them bag workouts. A few little strategies. 1, make sure that your warm-up's good. So do the full mobility warm-up. Potentially in that mobility warm-up after it, do some more high-intensity shadow boxing and pair that up with some isometric holds, whether that's an isometric pull-off press against the wall or doing some punch iso holds. What this will do will increase muscle activation upon impact, will help protect that back from injury. Then also look to improve thoracic rotation in your mobility training as well. So eagles, windmills, half kneeling, windmills and rotate and reach. This will help improve thoracic rotation, which will reduce the amount of loading going through the cervical spine. And then also in your boxing, look to just, in your bag workouts, like you haven't provided like the volume, the intensity that you're going in, but let's say you're doing 3-minute rounds, let's go for 1-minute rounds with 30-second recovery. Let's go for punching the bag at 5 out of 10 rather than going for 8 or 9 out of 10. With this, you can just trial and test a few things. What's painful, what's not, what's the things that I've implemented into my warm-up, what level of intensity that I'm going to, what level of pain am I feeling after that. Write that down and then you'll get a good log of what is going to be working for you, rather than going from shadow boxing with no impact force into hitting the bag with impact force and trying to go full out for 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, bridging the gap between that shadow boxing that's working for you right now and the bag work that isn't working for you right now. Start implementing some lower intensity work, maybe a 5 out of 10, going through the gears, doing 1 minute on, 30 seconds off, 1 minute on again, and then having your breaks, logging it down, how you're feeling, and then start building it up gradually, doing 2-minute rounds, then going to 3-minute rounds, but with a 5 out of 10, then going for 1 minute on, 30 seconds off, but then going for an 8 out of 10. You kind of get the picture. So building up the volume first with the same intensity, and then going back down, reducing the volume and increasing that intensity. Hopefully this helps you out. If you're wanting any more like kind of tips around this, drop me an email, dannywilson@boxingscience.co.uk. So I've got a question from Ethan Airy. I have a fight coming up. What would the last week of training look like leading up to the fight in terms of boxing training? So in terms of like strength and conditioning training that we do at Boxing Science, we look to keep things fast and explosive, working on increasing that range of motion through a lot of rotational exercises, then transferring strength and speed into fight week, working on plyometrics, working on jump exercises, and then looking to do more boxing specific exercises, such as the banded shadow box, the med ball punch throw, landmine punch throw, and also the punch iso holds. And the intensity of this reduces as we go towards fight night, and also the volume drops as well. With the boxing part, it's very much like the same principles. You're wanting to cut down the volume, but keep that intensity quite high. Working on speed and explosiveness, working in bursts, maybe reducing that volume from 3-minute rounds into 1-minute rounds to really work on that speed without accumulating fatigue. Just working on fight-specific drills, tactics that are going to be working into the fight, getting the body right through the strength and conditioning. Boxing is all about getting the mind right, knowing exactly what you're going to be doing when you're going into that bout. It would be probably down to personal preference, and this is why we don't really get involved too much in an athlete's taper in terms of their boxing routine. But I find that most professional boxers manage this quite well. They're more getting the strategies right, sharpening up the tools, going into the bout, and then they're getting the body right through the strength and conditioning work. And that's how we help our athletes at Boxing Science. Okay, question about cool downs. How would you go about doing a cool down after a strength or boxing session? I'd be really interested to hear your take on it. Cool downs are an interesting area, something that I probably don't implement that much at Boxing Science. In the strength training, they've got only 90 minutes twice a week to get all these exercises in, from lower body power to rotational power to the lower body lifts, upper body push and pull, the core, the neck, the grip. So they've got a lot of different exercises to try and fit in a very limited window. And also I'm wanting the athletes to feel stimulated after a strength workout, not wanting them to feel all calm and relaxed. I want them to be feeling quite good. So we often finish the strength workouts with a core circuit where they're feeling, yeah, I've worked today, rather than feeling zen and relaxed. In terms of cool down after a conditioning session, I'd be looking to do a light intensity treadmill run or a watt bike. Off-feet conditioning is pretty good to do after a workout. That's predominantly to cool down, obviously, but obviously to try and burn a few more calories. Energy expenditure is a big thing for boxing, but like me and Lee Rickards, who's a nutritionist, go back and forth in terms of like what we need to do with each athlete. If an athlete is looking to try and reduce their weight more and needing to lose more weight over that week, Lee will be on me to try and increase their energy expenditure. So a good way to do that without reducing the intensity, let's say if they're doing some air bike sprints, doing like a cool down for 15, 20 minutes on the watt bike is a great way to increase that energy expenditure whilst also doing a cool down. Also encourage athletes after high intensity conditioning, it's not to cool down, but actually to warm up. I encourage them to go into the sauna. This is for two reasons. One, it helps increase recovery after a hard, intense conditioning session, but also it helps prolong the adaptation that's stimulated from these sessions, particularly the sprint interval training sessions. So instead of cool down, we're actually getting our athletes to heat up essentially. And then also with boxing training, I just tend to tell them to do like some sort of PNF stretching, whether that's with a band, working different ranges of motion, working on their rotational stretching as well. Doing seated rotations are pretty good to use after boxing training as well. I don't particularly police them too much. I just show them a few stretches to do, whether it's a banded hip floss as well. These are great tools to use just after a boxing session to start cooling down. Nothing too structured, but something that can be implemented just at the end, just as they're bringing the heart rate down, just to feel loose and feel good after a hard, intense boxing session. So hopefully that's helped you. It's something that I don't really think about too often in terms of how I cool down an athlete, but actually I've answered the question. We've actually put in some important strategies in there. Strength training, we're wanting them to be stimulated. Conditioning training, we look to do an extra calorie burner, or we get them in the sauna. Then after boxing, we look to do actually some PNF stretches. MUFC 786. What supplementary exercises would you recommend for a 16-year-old amateur boxer who trains at the boxing club daily? Mainly thinking about stuff that will benefit the body for future. So get a lot of questions around how to implement strength and conditioning into amateur boxing schedule. This is why we brought out the amateur boxing strength and conditioning program to help coaches and athletes implement the strength and conditioning training into an amateur boxing session. Because amateur boxers are limited on time and facilities, finances, they can't get access to a strength and conditioning coach and be able to do that full time. So what's really important is to actually integrate all the S&C pillars into their boxing training. And this is easily done. You've got your boxing session in the middle. At the start, you've got a warm-up. In that warm-up, you can do your movement and mobility, working on rotational mobility, hip mobility, glute strength, and also shoulder mobility as well. After that warm-up, doing some form of plyometrics, whether that's pogos, counter movement jump, ice skaters. These are all bodyweight exercises, really easy to do, that can help develop your speed and power, but also help you warm up, ready to go into your boxing training. It's potentiating that lower body, firing up that lower body, ready to go into intense boxing training. Then you've got your boxing training, and after that, you can do a strength circuit, whether that's working on squat, push, pull, and a single leg exercise. You can do a core circuit that is working on the 4 pillars of core training: flexion, extension, lateral flexion, and rotation. And then also you can do conditioning. So I'd encourage most amateur boxers to be doing sprint conditioning, doing 10 seconds on, 1 minute to 2 minutes off, primarily working on that speed and explosiveness. And these are all things that you can do after a boxing session. And you can do it on different days. So you can do conditioning on one day, strength on another, core circuit on another. If you're wanting more help with this, go and check out the amateur boxing strength and conditioning program. The link is in the description. You can also use our discount code Boxing Science 50 to get 50% discount on your first purchase at Boxing Science. Question from Big Jester, regular feature on the Boxing Science podcast. When doing 30-second max out sprints with 3 minutes rest, first 10 seconds reach 2000 watts. That's pretty good, but maintain over 1750 watts for the rest of the 20 seconds. And basically getting the RPE to 8 out of 10. The heart rate reaches 95 to 97%. Does this tell me I'm more aerobic or anaerobic? It all depends on body weight. But what I would say is that the decline, even though 2000 watts is pretty good, the decline to 1750 watts is very small. I'd expect somebody to be hitting 2000 watts to only just keep it above 1200 watts. So you could look at it in two ways. You could look at your endurance is pretty good, but also compared to the Boxing Science average, the difference between the top and bottom is pretty small. And also, you finding it at 8 out of 10 and having to use your cardiovascular demands probably shows that you've got a bit more in the tank and also being more aerobic base. So to try and improve this, instead of doing the 30 seconds on, 3 minutes off, I'll be looking to try and unlock some speed here. Doing the clusters will be good. So doing 10 on, 10 off, times 3, and then having 3 minutes rest will help unlock that speed. But also doing our pyramid hit program where we're basically going from on the minute, every minute, 50 seconds on, 10 seconds off, going all the way down to 10 seconds on, 50 seconds off will help unlock that speed. So mainly what you need to do is to be working towards unlocking that maximum power will really unlock your power endurance. And the minute, it sounds like you're going more aerobic pace on this, quite one pace. Really good for boxing because you're going to be an endurance athlete, but being able to work in them high intensity bursts, you might struggle with that. So to try and improve your performance on this, I think that you could potentially get up to 2200 watts instead. So what you need to work on more is that raw power, strength, speed, explosiveness, and being able to unlock that in your conditioning sessions. Question from Danyon Turgia. What is the difference between sprint interval training and muscle buffering training? They seem like they do exactly the same thing to me. All out efforts with a period of rest, or am I incorrect? So yeah, there is a difference between sprint interval training and muscle buffering conditioning. You're not incorrect in thinking and querying what is the difference, because I still have athletes and coaches that have been on the program for a long time, still need explaining what the difference is. Most basic thing that I can say about muscle buffering conditioning and sprint interval training is that the sprint interval training is trying to increase the size of the fire, trying to get our bodies to their absolute max. Muscle buffering capacity conditioning is basically working on a pretty big fire, but learning how to control that. And I'll explain the science behind that. With sprint interval training, we're pushing our athletes to the absolute max, where we're looking for high lactate values. When doing the 30-second max out sprints, we're looking for high lactate values that show that the muscle cell has been totally depleted. So we're looking for athletes to push beyond 20 millimole per litre, which is pretty tough. Endurance athletes only go up towards 4 millimole per litre on their lactate profile assessments. So this is over 5 times the max that an endurance athlete would go to. We've seen record holders, Stephen Cairns, hit 26 millimoles per litre, which is unbelievable. The physical demands and the psychological demands to push yourself to that level is unbelievable. So we're looking to try and increase the size of the fire. What level of lactate can we get to? With the muscle buffering capacity, what we're looking to is get to control the fire. Basically, getting to a lactate level between 10 and 12 millimole per litre. That's what a lot of the research says. Using the examples of Boxing Science, we try to get in between 12 and 14 millimole per litre because we're working with more high intensity athletes than what the research suggests. Being in this lactate zone is the intensity that is needed to train the muscle buffers. And these muscle buffers essentially control the amount of acidosis that's in the muscle cell. So this is basically controlling the fire. Also, what the difference is between muscle buffering conditioning and sprint interval training, that sprint interval training is more or less all out efforts for a very short amount of time. There's only like 2 or 3 ways on how to do it. 30-second max out sprints, the 20-second clusters, and the 10-second clusters. They're all sprint-based and max out efforts. Whereas the muscle buffering conditioning, there's a range of different ways we can do it. The research shows it's 2 minutes on, 3 minutes off. We do this on the curve, or we can do it on a treadmill with a 3% incline. This was the main way in how we did this. However, we have developed a range of different methods through trial and error that still fit this same adaptation. We've got our 12 seconds on, 48 seconds off, which seem like sprint interval training, but is working towards 85 to 90% of your max effort, whether that's on the air bike or whether that's on the curve. You've got your 1 minute intervals and you've also got your gears, which is basically going up through the gears, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, and then a 10-second sprint to finish across the 1 minute. So that's the reason why it's different. It's because the adaptation that we're targeting is different, but also there's a range of different ways that we can achieve that rather than doing max out sprints. Hopefully you've taken a lot from that. If you're a subscriber to the channel, you've seen me explain this quite a lot. If you're wanting to find out more about the science behind this, we've got our Ultimate Coaching for Combat Sports workshops that are going to be coming out online very soon. And also we've got our high intensity programs, which are on our product page at boxingscience.co.uk. Go and check out the link in the description. And also you've got your 50% discount, Boxing Science 50 voucher code. Good question here. I keep getting muscle strains in my lower back when sparring. Currently do core work before, static stretching before bed, warm-ups before sessions. Is there anything else that I can do, or perhaps do core work at a different time part of the day? First of all, I'd say if this is quite common, I'd be looking to get a physio or sports therapist to have a good look at you, see what you need to be working on. Predominantly in boxing, what I tend to see is people with lower back injuries have got one of 3 things. They've got either tight hips, underactive glutes, or most often being quite tight around the shoulders, particularly in thoracic rotation. Because we're tight in thoracic rotation, what will tend to happen is a lot of side bending, overreaching, or compensating through extension of the spine. So what I'd say is have a look at thoracic rotation, doing eagles, windmills, quadruple rotations, doing seated rotations as well. This might be something that's going to be quite beneficial in improving your rotational mobility and reducing the amount of loading that's going through your back. Also, doing some punch iso holds, some isometric pull-off holds as well. This will be quite good to fire up the core, fire up all the body to get ready to go into sparring. And also think about your warm-up in sparring. Do you just do some stretching and then just go in? Or do you do a high intensity like pad routine or bag routine? This is something that I see like a lot of professional boxers doing. They do a few stretches and then get into the ring, rather than actually going through what they'd probably do if they're going into a fight, where they're going through full pad routine before they're going into the bout. So what's important before you go into sparring is to actually go through the gears, work through them high intensity actions to get yourself ready to go into the ring. So try them out. And like I said before, if you're still struggling with this, go and see a physio or a sports therapist, or you can drop me an email, dannywilson@boxingscience.co.uk, see whether I can do anything more for you. This next question is about hypermobile joints. Now, I don't have a lot of experience with working with athletes with hypermobile joints. What I would say, using my knowledge and my experience, would be potentially looking at isometric exercises to create some more stability around the joint, whether that is a isometric hip thrust, whether it's particularly in the upper limb is something that hypermobility might really affect during boxing, because we're looking at like kind of getting into that full extension. If you're going into hypermobile, that can affect your elbow pain. So what we're doing is like kind of bicep curls or tricep extensions through isometric action. Also looking to do more strength training around the arms, more eccentric training as well to be able to control that deceleration. And that'll hopefully create some more muscular strength around the joints to stop you from being as hypermobile. Like I say, my experience in working with hypermobile athletes, especially in boxing, is quite limited, but they're my general kind of thoughts. Okay guys, so that's the end of this week's episode. Thank you very much for watching. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button so you support the growth of the channel and also don't miss out on any future content. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully see you on the next episode of the Boxing Science Podcast.